Everybody, it's Bill McDonald. Today you're going to see the Common Sense Math Doctor, and I have a question for you. What would cause 89% of the students in Texas to get a question wrong in math? I'm going to tell you that sometimes if you're locked into one curriculum or one program, specifically one way to teach something, there's going to be too many gaps that kids are going to have, and they're going to struggle with your math problems. So I'm going to say, as a math minor, that unless you differentiate your instruction, unless you supplement your sources, it's sort of like saying, here's our curriculum and here's our students full of gaps. And we're trying to take curriculum that's at this level and teach on a regular level that are way over your kids' heads because of COVID and whatever reason, whatever population you might say you have. None of that really matters, because if you want to get through to your kids, you're going to differentiate your instruction so that you can help them to read between the lines and be able to understand enough information to be able to do very well with math problems. The question that we're going to look at has one, two, three, four sentences. So you might as well call it a paragraph. If you look on the upper right hand corner there, my math program is called Common Sense Math. And many of you don't know me as a math consultant, but I am a math minor, and I was just as good, if not better, at teaching math to my students than reading and writing. It just happened that the scores in writing across Texas were very low because only 4th, 7th, 10th, ninth grade were doing writing back then. Now everybody's got to do it. So I'm helping lots of schools and students with writing, but I'm not going to give up my passion in math. So I'm going to be helping in math as well. So if you watch this problem and you feel like I can make a difference, I can take every single math problem, and you're going to see I took the two lowest in third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth grade math, and I put them on a little worksheet together so that I can show you it doesn't matter which problem you throw at me. I'm going to be able to help you figure out a way to help your students. And so I'm going to beg you to share this video about proportions, fractions, probability, odd numbers, fraction part, fraction whole, reducing fractions, fraction models. I'm going to talk about all of that in this one video with the lowest performing math question in the entire state of Texas this past spring. It was question number 26 from the 7th grade test, and only got 11%. So get a piece of paper, take notes, follow along, maybe draw some pictures, because I'm going to show you a very practical way to go from 11% of your students getting it right to only about 11% getting it wrong. Just understanding and filling in the gaps that come with vocabulary. So let's get started by showing you the problem first. Now, there's always some debate. We should always read, understand, read for understanding. But the debate is, should I read the question first or the problem? Well, since the TEAC is based on the question, the one with a question mark, you should probably always read the question first. Then you can read the problem, the ones with the periods. Then you can read the question again. That way, for sure, there's a complete understanding, so that when your kids start labeling and doing their strategies on paper, whether it's online or on paper, that you can see their work, you can see their process, that they'll begin to execute those strategies, begin to eliminate the wrong answers if it's multiple choice, to explain, to execute the strategies, to look for the evidence, the numbers needed to solve the problem in this case. And then it's possible that we might have to select a constructed response. And in this case, it would be a fraction because of some things we're going to discover. So let's go ahead and take a look at my mathematics chart that has the rules for problem solving. Read the question, then the problem solo, as in softly in a testing situation with a whisper phone or covering your ears, or loudly with class, group, and partner settings. That way you can see it, say the problem and the question, hear and listen to keywords, think about connections that you've made because you're not allowed to use a book called the dictionary, and then you'll hopefully be able to start writing out the strategies. Understand those keywords in the question, and then look for and label all the numbers, bracket, opening and closing bracket, and words that will help you solve the problem. Evaluate the problem carefully so that you can make a plan. Execute, not ugly, your strategies. Eliminate any extra information from your mind or from the problem. Eliminate and explain the wrong answers. And you're either going to select the correct answer, singular, or answers, plural. Now that some of the constructed responses, about 7 to 9, depending on your grade level, are going to be um, constructed either 1 or 2 point questions. Search for errors, then you'll go ahead and bubble in your Scantron. Multiple choice would be A, B, C, D, or it could be, like I said, the constructed, and we're going to do both ways. And you can also have a good response. And then when you're finally done checking all of your answers, you'll push submit, and then it's done. So with that in mind, we read the question. What is the probability? Probability is something that could probably happen. The only thing that could probably happen is what's possible. So let's find out what's possible. All three numbers will land on an all number cubes. So the second I think of a cube, I think of an ice cube. I think a really Rubik's cube, and I think of dice. Will land on an odd number. Okay, odd numbers. That's two things that your kids might struggle with. They don't know that probability means proportion or that it means fractions. They might not know what odd means. And so what I want you to think about is something that I have in my folder that whenever you're trying to understand content, in order to revise passages and essays, you have to understand it first. And so sometimes you're going to use this ARM acronym down here on the lower right hand side of my folder that says for sequencing of a problem or a passage, actors remember more story sequence, because the problem is a little mini story that's happening where somebody's doing something in a certain order. Or I could draw pictures because life happens at full speed and reading, writing, and math happen in slow motion. Sometimes we're going to slow life down and draw little pictures or act out each little part. And so I would suggest that you write that down somewhere, have two arms that you draw on a person, a little cartoon character, and with one of them write actors remember more story sequence, and artists remember stories more story sequence, or setting, or the senses. Because when you draw, you're going to get to see and hear and taste and smell and touch. And that doesn't even include the arm that's actually meant for revising the content by adding, removing, replacing, or moving something, a word, a phrase, a transition, a sentence. So keep that in mind. And what we're going to end up doing is, because one of the constructed type responses, everything above this red line on my math folder is for reading and writing. If it's below the line, it could be for any of the other subjects as well. And so if you look at number 10, it says fraction model. So instead of just going straight to multiple choice, we're going to make a fraction model that's both with and without a reduced fraction, so that we can show the two numbers that would be given. And in most cases, fraction models are going to be worth 1 point from what I've seen so far in the samples, but it's possible if there's two fractions, they could be worth 2 points. So like if they asked you for the reduced fraction and the fraction before it was reduced, that could be possibly worth 2 points. So something to keep in mind on your constructed type responses. Remember that they're always going to be worth 1 or 2 points. All right. And so you're going to see how handy this little folder comes in. So even though it says advanced ELA English Language Arts Reading and Writing folder, because math is now so much reading. If you flip this W for writing upside down, you've got your math, your M for math. So I worked out the problem, but I thought to myself, we're going to start pretending that we don't know that the answer choices are there by covering them up. So life happens at full speed, reading and writing happens in slow motion. So let's slow down this passage. So the question said the probability that all three will be odd. Probability is proportion. Proportion. Part to whole. Fraction part. Numerator. Fraction whole. Denominator. And so what's going to be possible is exactly what they say. Since they're asking for the odd numbers only of all the numbers that can come out, your kids are going to have to understand that. But let's go ahead and read the problem piece by piece. Regina has 3 cubes. So there, step 1, 3 number cubes. I can tell that they're dice because of the numbers 1 through 6. So I drew 3, and I was like, man, I don't like this last one. It looks more like a rectangular prism. So as much as possible, have your kids draw cubes that actually look like cubes that would be proportionally correct. Okay, the faces of each number cube, each one, number from 1 through 6. So there I go, 1 through 6, 1 through 6, 1 through 6. Regina is going to roll each one 3 times. Roll this one, and roll this one. What's the probability? How is it? What's the possibility? Possible that all 3 odd fraction part. So in other words, that the odd that all 3 rolls will be odd. And so step 1 is going to be saying, well, if we didn't have a good program that taught us the difference between even and odd, then that's where Mr. McDonald comes in and does a training with you so that you can teach things that kids perhaps have forgotten or they haven't looked at in a long time. It says, even if you're odd, you can learn your even and odd. So if you look at the word odd, it has 1 vowel. So the first odd number that's not a 0 is 1. The word odd has 3 letters. So the first 2 odd numbers are 1 and 3, but they said that it's numbers 1 through 6. So If we skip count, the next odd number after 1 and 3 would be 5 because you skip 4. And since there's no more, that means that there are 3 chances out of the 6 that your students would roll an odd number. Let's see if my little trick with vowels and letters works for even. If they were to ask for even, what is the possibility, the probability that all 3 could be even? Well, let's find out. Because there's 2 vowels in the word even, the first even number that's not 0 is 2. There's 4 letters in the word even, 4. And then you would skip count. The next one would be a 6. So you would skip count and then don't forget 0. 0 is included in the number 10, 20, 30, etc. And so you don't have your students knowing what odd means. You need to do that lesson. You have to do what I call a TMI, a teachable moment of instruction, to remember the difference between odd and even, and or a teachable moment of intervention if nobody remembers. So when I start saying to you odd, then right away your kid's hand should go 1 3. If you say even, 2 4. And that way their brain is triggered the second they hear odd, the second they say odd and see odd, their mouth should say odd, and the correct amount of fingers should pop up. Okay, so that would be step 1. So what does the fraction part look like? Well, odd, the first time, the first dice is a 1 and a 3 and a 5 out of 6. What does that look like? 3 6 constructed. But they said they're going to do it 3 times. They're going to roll each one time. So we have another 1, a 3, and a 5. So that one has a 3 6 chance. 3 out of 6 of coming out odd. My last one, 1 3 5. 3 out of 6 chance of coming out. But if your kids do that 3 times 3 times 3 numerator over 6 times 6 times 6 denominator, that might be where they struggled, because they have to remember the question is over here and you have to respond to the question, not respond to the problem. So I'm going to show you in my another poster in my math posters where I go look for 3 6 and say, okay, I don't want to have to be multiplying with huge numbers. And so I need you to order my equivalent fractions common denominator guide. Basically, it's my mathematics posters, uh, so that your kids can have this to start out with, and they can quickly make their own on test day, so that if they see a 3 6, they'll be able to quickly reduce. I can say, oh, if the further I go to the left, the more reduced I can get. And so basically the 3 out of 6 is the same thing as 1 out of 2. 1/2 of the time the numbers are going to come out odd, which means that the other half of the time the numbers will come out even. So if they happen to misunderstand the difference between even and odd, they still would have gotten the same answer, because 2, 4, and 6 are even. That would be 3 out of 6. So the next step would have been for your kids to write 1/2, second time 1/2, third time 1/2. 1 times 1 times 1 is 1. 2 times 2 times 2, 4 times 2 is 8. So that means that the possibility of the fraction coming out, sorry, that the numbered would be, the all 3 numbers would be odd, uh, it decreases. So you have a 50-50 chance of odd coming out. You only do it 1 time, and then you only have a 1 times 1/4, 25% chance of it coming out if you do it 2 times. And you only have a 12.5% chance, because I already know that 8 times 12.5 is 100%. So 1/8 would be your answer. And so step one, if it's a fraction model, you would enter 1 in the numerator and an 8 in the denominator, a 1 in the dividend, and an 8 in the divisor. Why am I saying those things? Because I want to make sure your kids know what those numbers mean and where they go. If you were to divide these fractions, this is called a proper fraction because the smaller number is on the top. And it's unfortunate that the answers were there, right there in front of your kids, 1/2. If you only rolled it once, you have a 3/6 chance. That would have been with one dice, one time. 1/6. That would have been if they would have asked, what is the odds of rolling a one number, a specific number, only 1 out of 6. Fraction part 1. Huh, 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 6. Huh, huh. 1/3 of the time is if your students misunderstood the question and all they did was put one dice as the numerator and rolling it 3 times as the denominator, they wouldn't understand. Proportion, fraction part, fraction whole, possible. Make sure your kids understand how to do all that. And so the answer, as you can see, is 1/8. And so I don't know what happened if your kids didn't bother reading the question carefully. They didn't know that probability means proportions for 3 numbers being rolled, 3 dice being rolled, not one, or if they didn't know what an odd number meant. So those are just my suggestions on how to improve that. You can email me at my normal email address at writing_doctor@yahoo.com. But if you want guidance, that mathematics chart that I showed you has the rules of, I'll share my screen with you again so you can see each part. It has the rules of problem solving. On the opposite side, it has a whole bunch of keywords, all the different clues in addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, and the keywords that your kids would need to be looking for to kind of have an idea of which operation they'll be doing. And then when you flip it to the inside, I was doing a math training the other day, that you will be able to see that there's your A, B, C, D that we're only allowed to pick now if it's multiple choice, and it goes all the way to the 100 billions. And since this was dealing with fractions, it basically was like 3/6 for the first time, 3/6 for the second time, and 3/6 for the third time. And so when you reduce 3/6, the new fraction would have been 1/2 of the times. It would have come out odd times 1/2 times 1/2, 1/8. And then it's got another little thing here. Where do you find the word each? Are the keywords the same or different? Is it integers where you have to do PEMDAS? I use a traffic light for that. Or are we having to change fractions, proportions to decimals by dividing, or to percents by moving the decimal? We also have little lines here. We want to divide things in 1, 2, 3, 4. Is it fifths? Or this one, is it in tenths? And these are already divided into proportional pieces, these big boxes. Are they asking for cents as in money, percent, or percent, percent? So no matter what problem that I go over the next week to 10 days, I'm going to be able to use it using either my mathematics chart or my mathematics posters. You saw this one today. That's in there. You can see that one's on page 11. My even and odd is on page 35, and a new one I added this year because of the law of supply and demand. Uh, when the supply goes down, the price goes up if the demand goes up. If the supply goes up and the demand goes down, then the price has to go down. If the demand and the supply stay the same, then the price would stay the same. And so I think this is a real helpful chart using the concept of a teeter-totter. And so when you get a math training, every teacher gets a class set of uh, the mathematics charts that you saw and a little colorful book with all of my math posters that kind of fill in all the gaps. Because in case you didn't hear me say this already, for the last, this is probably one of the most important things I'm going to tell you. For the last 2 years in Texas, the lowest 10 tests in all subjects and grade levels, 7 of them were math. And unfortunately, there's only 7 math tests in Texas: third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, and ninth grade algebra. And so something's going wrong if that many students are struggling. That means that none of the programs that you're using are filling in the gaps. And so it's to your own detriment to not supplement and say, hey, let's bring in this guy that can show kids a different way to remember things forever. Because if I ever got my hands on your students with their eyes and their ears, they would remember odd and even for the rest of their lives. They would remember proportions and fractions and understanding questions and understanding how to solve problems uh, as if it was just without even thinking. So I look forward to the chance of working with you and your math students and teachers. Please share this if you're a reading teacher watching this on my ELAR page. If you have a math teacher friend, because sometimes we need to help each other out. Sometimes vocabulary in math needs to get sent over to their reading teacher so that when there's a passage that talks about proportions and probability and fractions, your kids will be able to remember that I'm learning that this week in math. And so there should be an ever growing word bank in reading where that reading teacher gets vocabulary from the math, social studies, science, PE, health, music, band, sports, whatever terms they're using and learning that week. Make sure that you can build a word bank. And the problem is that anywhere from 25 to 45% of the questions are supporting standards. We shouldn't just be dependent on each other across the grade level horizontally, but we should be interdependent on each other vertically, vertical alignment, where we find out what were the gaps that were left in the previous grades so that we can fill those gaps. So if you're an eighth grade teacher and you're watching this seventh grade video, it's real important that you teach your kids the concept of probability, proportions, fraction part, fraction whole. Make sure I didn't forget any words. Possible, part two, whole. Just little things that will help them remember things a little bit longer. And so the acting part. Actors remember more story sequence. We would act out rolling that dice, those 3 dice, one time each. And if you did that enough times, approximately 1/8 of the time, the number that would come up would be odd. So please share or tag your math teacher friends for this video, because I could tell fractions are a huge problem in Texas. Something is not being taught. It's maybe not what we're teaching, but maybe how we're teaching it, or the lack of understanding that your students have of what a fraction really is in terms of what's in the numerator and denominator, what those terms are called. So I look forward to hearing from you. Uh, please share or tag one of your math teacher friends, and we'll see you on the next video.